Welcome back to SCV Today, and I'm going to just bring right in Robert Mansour. We've had him on the program before from the law offices of Robert Mansour, but this is really cool because, and this is, I've experienced what we're going to talk about. You've got the 10 insurance company secrets that they don't want you to know about. You've got a list here.
True.
And we're going to go through these things because this is fascinating stuff. And this first one really surprised me. Insurance companies don't want you to get a police report after an accident?
That's right. And there's several reasons for that. The first reason is if you don't have a police report, you haven't documented the event. So sometimes they'll even deny that anything even happened. Or their client, their insured, will say, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're talking about. I was at the ball game. I went to the Kings game. And so also they don't want you to have a police report because the other party can change their story. If the police report documents what happened, the other guy can't wiggle out of what happened. So when a client comes to me and says, I didn't have the police report, I say, watch their story change. They apologize to you at the scene for causing the accident, but now that there's no police report, they're going to change their story. Let's watch how it unfolds. And I would say 50% of the time, the other party indeed changes their story. And the last reason they don't want a police report is because if you tell the officer you were injured and the officer writes it down, it lends more credibility to your assertion that you were injured. But the absence of a police report, they will assume you weren't injured. Otherwise, you would have called the police. And so they'll use it against you.
Now, what is the time frame for filing a police report? Because my automatic assumption is that you must do it within an hour of an incident.
You should do it at the scene. If you suspect you were injured, even a little bit, most people don't call the police. They think their head has to fall off their body and roll down the street to call the police. You call the police if you think you've been injured or if you think there's going to be a dispute in liability. Get the police down there. And if filing a police report a few days later is not really helpful. It's just you going down to the station telling your version of the story. It doesn't really help very much. So you should do it right there at the scene. The officers will ask you over the phone, was anybody injured? If you say no, they're not coming. But if you say, I think I may be injured, which might be true if you feel something, because sometimes these injuries don't manifest themselves until the next day. And so you should always err on the side of caution, in my opinion.
So to protect yourself, if there are no injuries, but there's some damage, because a lot of times you can have quite a bit of damage, but no injuries, and they're not going to send someone out, should you go directly to the police department then and file it there?
If you feel that the other side is going to change their story, you might want to preserve it. But again, it's really not of much importance if you go down to the police and tell them what you think happened versus an officer investigating at the scene and talking to everybody and writing everything down.
So get the police department there on scene.
I think that's a good idea, especially if you feel that you might have been injured.
And I'm assuming, too, because points 2 and 3 are very similar, they don't want you to go to call an ambulance. They don't want you to go see a doctor.
An ambulance is a perfect example of injury. I mean, if you were taken away by ambulance, it's hard for them to argue that you weren't injured because the ambulance guys are not going to take you to the hospital unless they feel that there's something to do. If you're just sitting there, and if you're sitting there and they take you to the hospital, that's further evidence that you were injured. And so they'll often tell me over the phone, well, your client wasn't taken away by ambulance. So they will use the lack of an ambulance as evidence that you were not injured. And the same thing was, what was the last one you were talking about?
Don't go to a doctor.
Yeah. They will use, if you wait too long to go to a doctor after an accident, and too long, I would say anything beyond a week or two, they will poo-poo your injury. And a lot of clients, especially guys, try to man up. They're like, I'll be fine. This shoulder, it hurts, but I'll be fine. 2 weeks go by, they're like, it's not fine. I can't lift my shoulder. They go to the doctor. The insurance company will say, you waited too long. You didn't go to the doctor soon enough, so it must be something else that caused your shoulder injury.
Right, and you'll hear people all the time saying, I don't need an ambulance, my friend can take me, my wife can take me, my husband can take me to the hospital.
It is an expense.
So,
I mean, you have to be aware of that. So yeah, sometimes people forego an ambulance because it's expensive.
Right.
So I would think the suggestion there would be if you're not going to take an ambulance and you are injured, go straight to the hospital.
Go to urgent care, do something that shows that you were injured, because if you don't, they will use it against you.
Now, another thing, and we were talking about this during the break, that the insurance adjusters are trying to befriend you. They're trying to be open. Let's meet for coffee.
Oh yeah, that's a new strategy. What they do is they call you within 24 hours, and they're very friendly. We'll take care of this. We're going to pay for everything. Don't you worry. You know, they send you flowers. I'm being silly, but here's the new thing. Some insurance companies are having adjusters put lids on cases very fast. So what they'll do is they'll say, let me meet you at Starbucks because I want to learn more about the accident. I want to learn more about your injuries. They don't want to learn anything. They want to dangle a check in front of you at Starbucks. Here's $500. Why don't we call this a day? Would you sign here? And the next thing you know, you're signing away all your rights because you were presented with a $500 check, and at the time it seemed reasonable. But the next day, it doesn't seem so reasonable when you're still hurt, or you find out that you have a disc injury and you weren't aware that it was a disc injury. So yeah, let's meet for coffee. The friendly insurance adjuster approach.
And then you have here on one of the things, they will patently give you false information.
Yes, and unfortunately there are always bad eggs in every industry. So one of the false things that they'll tell you is they'll say, well, if you had a back injury before, you can't make a claim for a back injury from this case. Or it seems that you had shoulder surgery in the past. If your shoulder is hurting you, you're not allowed to make another claim for that. Or they will tell you something like, don't hire a lawyer because you're not going to recover enough money if you hire a lawyer. And the biggest one is, we'll pay for your medical records. I'm sorry, we'll pay for your medical bills. They will always tell my clients, oh, we'll pay for everything. Don't you worry, you just send us the bills. And I always tell my clients, they're not going to pay your bills. They're not, because insurance adjusters adjust. That's their job. They have to adjust. So what do? They take your bills and they offer a fraction of them. They tell you they're going to pay the bills, but they don't. They just pay a fraction of those bills because they adjust them and they say, oh, this was too expensive, this was unnecessary, and now you're stuck with all these bills that you can't pay.
So at what point do we call our attorney? If I leave here today, I get into a little fender bender, do I call you right away?
I think it's a good idea to meet with a lawyer. 50% of the time when I meet with my clients, I tell them you're better off without a lawyer. I really do. And there are some attorneys who give the industry a bad name. I understand that. However, I will tell the client, look, you're better off without me. In fact, I have a video on my website, how to handle your own personal injury case, what to do step by step, because sometimes you don't need to involve the lawyer.
Right.
But wouldn't it be nice to know what your rights are so that when you are told information by the insurance adjuster, it comes through that filter and you know whether you're being taken for a ride or whether they're being truthful with you.
In a way, you're almost, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here with you a little bit.
Yeah.
You're almost painting a picture that the insurance companies are the devil, that they are evil and they are to be fought and stayed away from. That can't truly be the case.
No, because I used to work for an insurance company for 13 years before I opened my own law firm. And I was on the other side. My job was to poke holes in these cases. My job, when I got the file, the first thing I would look at, was there a police report? Were they taken away by ambulance? What can we use against this person? And it was all about preserving the interests of the insurance company. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that realize that the insurance adjuster is not your advocate. They are the advocate for their employer. And they're going to have supervisors to answer to. And they're going to be like, well, why did you pay this much? And why did you pay this claim? There's always certain insurance adjusters who are much more flexible than others. And of course, for purposes of this segment, we're just being cautiously aware of some of the tricks and the strategies, I should say, that are being employed by the insurance companies.
I want to wrap up our segment with you being able to tell our audience all of the law that you practice, because obviously your personal injury, you're a brilliant estate planner.
Please keep it coming.
Correct. So to let the audience know what they can contact you for, what your specialties are.
Sure, I appreciate that. I do two areas of law. Having worked for the insurance companies as a defense attorney, I now represent victims of serious accidents, and I feel that I can bring a unique twist on that because of my background. But 50% of my practice is what we talked about before: wills, living trusts, powers of attorney, probate, what we call estate planning.
Right.
Yeah.
Very important stuff.
Thank you.
Very important stuff.
Sure.
So, and as you can see, he's a great guy to work with. Who wouldn't want to work with Rob Mansour?
Thank you very much.
Rob, thanks again.
You're going to make me blush. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much.
It's always great to see you. This is great information, and thank you for being able to talk about it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You got it. When we come back, the guys in the crew are going to be happy. Rob's going to be happy. We're all going to be happy. Food is on its way. Marie Callender's is here. Of course, we always talk about Marie Callender's as the holidays come in, so please stay tuned.